Hello, I am Sandra Hess, President of Women for WineSense in Napa, Sonoma. And I thought it would be a lot of fun to sit down with one of our founders, Michaela Rodeno, as well as Julie Lumgare, our winemaking roundtable chair, to talk about what all of the buzz is in the wine industry with women winemakers, women COOs, women winery owners, and also all of the new women or what networking organizations that have popped up, the nonprofits and networking groups. So we are in for a lively conversation. And just a quick overview about Women for WineSense Napa, Sonoma. The organization formed in 1990 and is now a national organization for both professionals and wine aficionados. Across the nation, we have 10 chapters with over 800 members. And so it's really exciting to be in an organization where you've got roundtable groups that meet on a regular basis. You've got guest speakers and educational opportunities to expand your awareness, whether you're on the winemaking side and want to learn about marketing or HR, finance, a lot of opportunities to learn about the wine industry as a whole. And so we invite you to explore Women for WineSense, whether you're a professional or an aficionado, an enthusiast. Have a lot of fun with it. Come join us at a future event. Check out womenforwinesense.org. Visit the local chapter Napa Sonoma, find our events calendar. We would love to meet up with you at an upcoming event. And by the way, men are welcome at our events. I always like to mention that. Without further ado, let's get right into our conversation today. I have the pleasure of meeting with Michaela Rodeno, one of the founders of Women for WineSense Napa Sonoma, as well as Julie Lumgare, an outstanding roundtable chair for the winemaking group. And by the way, Julie, I just wanted to comment on your background. Can you tell us a little bit about where you are?
Oh, yeah. Well, I just came in from the field. It's the time of year with this incredible weather that spring has sprung and the shoots are growing like crazy. We're out there trying to assess how vintage 2017 is shaping up. So I just pulled over here at a convenient spot near one of the key vineyard blocks. I'm actually over in Russian River today. And what can I say? This is a wonderful opportunity to just take a break from walking the fields, and then I'll be back out for the afternoon.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for taking some time out of what you're doing right now in the vineyards, in the fields. Can you also introduce us a little bit and tell us about your background, Julie, as a winemaker?
Sure. I'm going into, I guess this will be my 13th vintage as a head winemaker. And I'm a winemaker that's had two careers. My first was in sensory science and brand management and food new product development, as well as pharmaceutical. And then I moved into winemaking. And all that adds up to, I just love sensory science, and I'm a fifth generation farmer. So for me, it's all about hands-on in the field and in the winery, and using a lot of really good techniques to, guide things at every step and hopefully make every vintage the very best it can be and expressive of a place. And I guess I've really favored working in Napa and Sonoma County's Russian River Valley and Chalk Hill AVAs, but my work's taken me as far away as Italy, and I've worked on 21 varietals so far. My key three, of course, have to be big, fat, gorgeous Napa calves and amazing Pinot Noirs every vintage. And I love working with red blends.
Very nice. Well, I like all of those, so you're speaking my language. Thank you so much, Julie, for that. And Michaela, we'd love to hear about your background and just a couple of comments as I get ready to introduce you, from Bubbles to Boardrooms, your book. I read that this past year, and it just gave me such a better understanding of your background in the wine industry as a whole. So when you introduce yourself today, I would love for the audience to hear a little bit about your start in the wine industry before we even get into Women for WineSense.
Okay, well, I go back a long way in the wine business. I was very fortunate to move to Napa in 1972 when there still wasn't a whole lot going on here, and I did not bring a winemaking background with me. but I was very lucky to stumble into the beginnings of Domaine Chandon. In fact, I was the second employee of Domaine Chandon. And this was back before the internet, well before the internet. So our French owners were pretty hands-off because it was pretty hard to be hands-on from 6,000 miles away. So we had a lot of fun putting together vineyards and the winery and a whole program and a team, and eventually launching in 1977. It was great fun. That's the bubbles of my book, Bubbles to Boardrooms. And after 15 years of bubbles, I moved over to the still wine side of the industry when I became the first CEO of St. Sucre Winery, which was also French owned. But this time the internet was there. So it was a little bit more intimate and experience, shall I say, with the owners. And another big challenge and lots of fun too. And then I retired in 2009 and wrote a book about it all, Bubbles to Boardrooms. Boardrooms is a lot of what I do now. And then, of course, Women for WineSense was one of the things that I look upon very fondly as a highlight of my long career. And I'm delighted to still be involved.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that background. I know Women for WineSense founded in 1990, so celebrating 27 wonderful years, and now over 800 members against 10 chapters nationally. I mean, it continues to grow. We've got the big grand event coming up in the Finger Lakes region, July 27th through 29th. So really excited to talk with you both about the buzz, and so we're hearing a lot of buzz these days about women in wine. And, two outstanding women in wine individuals you are. I would like to hear a little bit more about the key differences from your perspectives that Women for WineSense brings. And I know there's a couple others that are nationally based, regionally based, but let's really focus today on Women for WineSense and the key differences. And Julie, I'm going to turn this question over to you first, because I think, seeing how you've supported the winemaking roundtable and the type of events that you put together, the speakers that you bring in to support your members is really remarkable. So I would love to hear from you about why are the roundtables with Women for WineSense so different? What are they all about?
Well, I think that the most important thing for me is I recognize in production there are about 28 hours we need every day, and we don't get 28 hours a day. So to participate in something that's outside of your current roles and responsibilities, it really has to over-deliver on a value proposition. And something that has always been a core of our roundtable has been getting skills that you want to move your career ahead as a winemaker or a viticultural professional, but just can't get every day in your regular role. And that takes, frankly, a real skill in programming, as you mentioned, really bringing in top-notch speakers on topics that are very relevant and worth missing some hours of work over and worth bringing your friends to. The next thing is the value of the community itself. So, just to give you a few key metrics that I think really speak to the value of our winemaking viticultural roundtable, we're over 70 members strong. We're always growing because, thankfully, there are more and more women who are rising in the ranks of winemaking and viticulture, and there are many more coming up in the rising star category. Our 70-plus members are a really wonderful mix of directors of winemaking, general manager winemakers, owner winemakers, vineyard owner who also make wine. But then the other half of the group is the rising stars of tomorrow. And we have an amazing presence of the next generation coming from cellar, from lab, from the field, and the energy that everyone brings to the composition of the group is very inspiring, and I think it helps us all be better. The second thing that we really focus on, besides the quality of programming and the membership composition, is the energy, our mission of why we're there. Of course, it's to get the skills we can't get every day in our role, but it's also to create this village. We're always saying it takes a village. We're all in it together. There's no attitude at our round tables. It's just this amazing cadre of professional women who are all so accomplished, from some of the largest, some of the biggest pulp producers in Napa, Sonoma, and beyond. And we just come together and, frankly, we help each other out. And we have an amazing composition of membership and a lot of details in the benefits. But we can get to that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I mean, when we talk about the buzz, I hear this buzz all the time. I was out at our Tessa winery for our March Women winemakers then and now panel discussion. And at that beautiful dinner event, so many of the members, talking about how long they've been in roundtables and how roundtables have really made a huge difference in terms of the relationships. Some people have been meeting for 10 years, 15 years, and it has become a mentoring environment where outside of the meetups and get-togethers, they're getting together for lunch and dinners at each other's houses. They're traveling together. I mean, they're forming these lifelong bonds because of Women for WineSense roundtables. So it's really exciting for me to hear it directly from you as well. Michaela, the big idea for Women for WineSense, so we hear a lot of buzz now, women in wine and women organizations all over, not only in the wine industry, but all over the nation. You had the foresight back, in 1990 to form this wonderful organization. Why?
It was a happy accident, as some of the best things are. Back in the late 80s, there was a lot going on that was very negative for the wine industry. In fact, it was sort of an anti-alcohol movement that unfortunately also swept the wine industry up with it. And our trade organizations really weren't doing anything to counter a lot of the negative reporting in the press about how bad alcohol is for you. And a lot of the reporting was being fed by advocacy groups who were interested in basically controlling women's bodies. Does that sound like a new idea? No, not really. So a group of us were at an industry conference in early 1990, and we were talking about this and how helpless we all felt and how angry we were that nobody was standing up for the wine industry and saying, what do you mean, alcohol and other drugs? That's what they're telling our kids in school. And that's just not right. Alcohol isn't a drug the way opioids are, and we're all in the wine business, and our kids come home from school and ask us questions like this because they're genuinely confused. There were other things. Fetal alcohol syndrome was being beaten up. Pregnant women were being told, one glass of wine is one big risk for you and your unborn child. And, you sat there thinking, well, what about Europe? Women in Europe for, centuries have been drinking wine and continuing with their normal lives, and it seems to work out okay. What's wrong with America? So anyway, that was the context, and we were standing around talking about these things at a conference, and suddenly Julie Williams, one of the founders of Frogs Leap, looks me right in the eye and she says, well, we could do something about it. And I went, oh yeah. I had just started this new job. I had 2 small children, and she's laying this big thing on me. And of course I said, yeah, we better do that. So we called a meeting, and Margaret Mondavi agreed to feed us all lunch at her home, and about 60 people showed up. Everybody felt the same way we did. We really wanted to do something to defend wine. And it turned into this wonderful high energy crusade, which went on for a couple of years. We were calling on legislators, we were educating ourselves in the press, and we were received with open arms everywhere we went because we were the moderate middle, the common sense people. That's where WineSense comes from, by the way, common sense. So then 60 Minutes came along late in 1991 and did the French Paradox story that basically blew the lid off all of this because it showed that French people have much lower incidences of heart disease than Americans, and yet they seem to indulge in lots of foie gras and butter and cream, things that were supposed to give you really big heart trouble. And the reason given why they got away with it is because they regularly drink red wine in moderation with their foie gras. So we thought, okay, 60 million Americans saw that show and said, bring on the red wine, we're ready for it. So that kind of solved the public problem of alcohol in the world for us. So a couple of years later, we had a strategic planning session and said, well, we've accomplished our mission, or rather 60 Minutes has really helped us a lot, so do we need to continue to exist? And we looked around the room at one another and said, well, yeah, we don't want to stop doing work together. This is really fun. We're enjoying ourselves, but the work should change, that's all. So at that point, we decided this would become an organization focused on wine education and on what is now known as networking, building relationships among ourselves and helping one another in our careers. And that's pretty much what's been going on since 1994 with great success.
Mm-hmm. And I really like in that story how you shared that, Margaret Mondavi and your friend Julie Williams coming together and saying, it's the time. This is the time. Let's do it. Let's
joined together, and the energy that you had also as an organization, as a group, on fire, and getting the attention of the press, getting the attention of the right people. And it sounds lovely and glamorous right now from my perspective, but I'm sure there was some blood, sweat, and tears involved in some of that as well. I mean, you know, how did you get the attention?
The brand new photocopier at St. Cyprian, I will tell you, because since we didn't have an internet yet, we had to make hard copies of all the information on the medical research that we were sharing with ourselves and the press and the policymakers. And that was a several $1,000 machine that had a very short life.
Wow. So can you explain where you were going and finding this information at the time? I guess you were going down to the local libraries. You were going to, where were you finding the information you needed to get that information in front of the right people, writers, you know, and members of the press?
Yeah, it's a good question. It turned out that there was a lot of information, a lot of very good research being done in Europe and in the US, but it was all being sequestered in the US. You couldn't have access to it. Actually, Wine Institute had a very good library, but they weren't sharing it because they were afraid of what had happened in the tobacco industry with product liability cases. And so they didn't really want to get into that kind of argument. They were doing the sort of keep your head down strategy. And so luckily for us, a couple of our early board members, Julie being one of them and Margaret Duckhorn being another, were both trained nurses. And so they were sort of plugged into the medical community, and they got into researching what was available in Europe. Oh. And we found some terrifically useful stuff.
Oh, that's such an interesting story. I love it. Every time I talk with you, Michaela, I'm learning something new. You know, and if there is a will, there is a way. And, you know, seeing that with Women for WineSense and my decision to join forces with Women for WineSense in the last 5 years, you know, and all the buzz around the other women organizations in wine, I really found early on leaders like yourself at events, whether it was over at Backroom Wines or a big event at Trinchero, there's always a conversation that would take place about how women in wine were thinking outside of the box to get a new job, to learn a new skill, to make a move, to literally, you know, pick up and go to a different wine region if needed. And so I'm always inspired to hear about the stories that Women for WineSense members have and share. And it's just so motivating and exciting, I think. And that's a really big difference for me when I look at, you know, being a part of an organization supporting women in wine. So Julie, this is a good question, I think, back to you. You know, Michaela shared with us a lot about the foundation and, you know, how we've come together. What are some key issues that you're finding in your roundtable group? Are there things that your members are on fire about or initiatives that they find really important to them?
Well, I can definitely think of a few key areas, and that really ties back to what our roundtable's mission statement is about. It's the skills that we're always reassessing that we need to move ahead in our everyday careers, but we can't get in our daily jobs. And it's this incredibly valuable concept of an expanded sense of community of women in the wine industry. Now, you're remembering where winemakers and the viticulture people come from, we tend to work a little bit more alone. We do not tend to be so much in a daily group of lots of people unless you're in one of the member organizations. It's a very large winery. You're going to be more of an independent operator, and therefore our sense of community and the value that we want to bring and that members are asking for is how do we get together? How do we solve our problems together? How do we learn something together? How do we make more friendships and more mentoring opportunities happen? And our answer to that, because we reassess every year and do a strategic plan, is that we want to have these programs 6 times a year at some of the region's finest host wineries. We want to bring in compelling speakers that are, again, worth, you know, taking hours off of work and jumping in the carpool to go to, and make this an opportunity to meet people who you otherwise would not get to interact with and get that benefit of the knowledge, but also this candid, kind of off-the-record opportunity in a very private forum to ask questions that otherwise you just wouldn't have permission to ask some of these noted industry experts. I'll give you an example. Just last week, we were over at Chimney Rock Winery was hosting us, and we had 60 winemaker and viticulture folks there to speak with one of the senior editors from Wine Spectator. And talk about candid. The Q&A session went on for over an hour, and everybody was just asking straight from the heart, no holds barred. People really wanted to know, since she was not just the senior editor, but the panel coordinator for all the tastings. We got deep, and she was completely candid. It was a fantastic conversation. And we've had conversations just like that with the senior editor of Wine and Spirits, with the senior editor of Wine Enthusiast. You know, you just can't to a critic, even if you meet them in any other forum, and have those kinds of conversations. But it's the power of our group and our mission, and then appealing to those wonderful guest speakers to share their time and expertise that kind of gives us that permission. And we've done this on topics such as innovation. Entrepreneurship is what we're going after next month. We've done financial finesse when you're talking to banks, boards, and owners. Media training, you name it. It's all about making ourselves better. But the dialogue we can have with that permission to be candid is not able to be recreated, I think, in any other space I've seen in the industry.
I would agree. Thank you for that. You know, I think about the 8 different roundtable groups now that have formed over the years, Women for WineSense here in Napa, Sonoma, and the strength. And, you know, going back to, you know, some of these people meeting 10, 15 years, and some groups we now have closed because they are so intimate in their conversations and the information that's being shared, whether it's the finance roundtable, the HR roundtable, or what have you. And that's understandable. Other groups are open for new members. And so for those of you in the audience listening, I would encourage you to check out womenforwinesense.org. Go to the local chapters page for Napa Sonoma and check out our roundtables. You'll find the roundtable chair contact info. You can read up a little bit about when they meet and what they're up to. But, you know, in listening to both of you today, what really comes across for me is that Women for WineSense, you know, the roots run deep. And Napa Sonoma being the founding chapter, you think about Doneen Dyer, who sat on our women winemaking panel last month at Artesa. You think about Kathy Corazon, and you think about the up-and-comers. You know, we had Stacy there from Minor Family, and we had Pauline from Domaine Chandon. And so you hear, you know, these up-and-comers sitting side by side with iconic women winemakers. And you hear them bouncing off one another, and it's just such a wonderful thing to see, the inspiration that both bring to the table. And that's something that you just don't find anywhere else. I haven't yet. And so that's something truly unique about the wine industry as a whole, but especially the women in the wine industry who are available to mentor, to take others under their wings and give some guidance. And so as we wrap up our time together today, I do want to chat a little bit about some of those people along the way who have been our biggest supporters. And Michaela, I'm going to turn this back over to you. You've touched on some of them already. Anybody else that I haven't mentioned that we should today?
Oh gosh, it's a really long list. In fact, I have a short version of it right here. Well, you mentioned Doneen. I obviously talked about Margaret Mondavi, and I can't say enough about Margaret. We just lost her recently, but she was with us all the way, right from the beginning. And every time we needed something, if we were really desperate. We are a nonprofit, which is another point of difference. And as a consequence, in the early days, we were really living hand to mouth. And in the absence of the internet, we had to mail things, and that means making copies and paying postage. Well, I could take the copies, you know, on my work copier, but I couldn't, you know, what do they call it? Counterfeit postage stamps. So we were totally out of money once, and we had a big mailer going out. And I wrote a letter to Margaret, and I said, Margaret, can you help us? And she sent us a check for $1,000 just like that, which for us was a big deal and kept us afloat a while longer. Carolyn Wente was an early supporter. Lily Thomas, Susan Sokolblosser up in the Willamette Valley, actually started the second chapter of Women for WineSense up in Portland. 2 years after our first chapter was founded. Let's see, who else? I can't read my own notes. Oh, Jamie Davis, who was one of the founders of Schramsberg, was also very involved. It's just a really, Rosemary Cake Bread. There are so many people who were involved in it and who are, everybody made a contribution in their own way. And one of the things that was really interesting to me is that several people who have become very, very good friends of mine, joined up with us early on because they loved wine, but they were not in the wine business. And they worked just as hard as all the rest of us to get Women for WineSense going and to accomplish our missions. So I think that's really a wonderful thing to have that kind of support from outside the industry. And Women for WineSense, in fact, does have a fairly large number of people who are not in the industry, especially the farther away you get from wine country.
Yes, I love that. We have wine education for the professionals and the enthusiasts. You always want the enthusiasts to be a part of the mix as well. And over 800 members strong now nationally, again, across 10 chapters. Yeah, again, for those of you who have just joined in the audience, this is Sandra Hess, and I'm the president of Women for WineSense Napa Sonoma since February 2016. It's been a wonderful learning experience with my board members. We've got just such a great mix within our board. One of them happens to be a male who is our treasurer. And so that's one thing I did want to touch on today also. A couple of questions I always get. One, can men be a part of the organization? And absolutely yes. And they have been more than wonderful throughout history in supporting Women for WineSense in many different aspects, but they're always invited to our events. As far as the roundtables, always ask with the roundtable groups. A couple of things I did want to touch on also about some new initiatives. You know, our long-standing relationship with Backroom Wines in downtown Napa. We've had our seminar series going on for years. We have a Summer Whites from Around the World seminar coming up there on June 1st that's going to be phenomenal. October 12th, we have European wines for the holidays. So these are very limited in terms of size for the Backroom Wine events, but make sure to mark your calendars early for that. I touched on the grand event that's held every year in the summer. This year taking place in the Finger Lakes, July 27th through 29th. I also invite you to check out our new meetups. We've launched 2 different meetups in Santa Rosa and Napa. The same place, same date of the month. And the reason being is we surveyed our members about a year ago and asked, what do you want more of? What do you want less of? So we're always trying to listen, ask questions, and build opportunities for members to get together in meaningful ways. So outside of the roundtables, it's a very casual meetup the last Tuesday of the month in Napa from 6 to 8 at Cadet Wine Bar. Again, check out our events calendar on the website. And then the last Thursday of the month now at Willoughby's in Santa Rosa. So very casual format. Come, bring some friends. Non-members are welcome to our meetup groups as well. A great way to get to know one another. So those are some upcoming initiatives. In addition, over the years, we've provided scholarships. We have done quite a bit of fundraising to provide up-and-coming, right out of college individuals opportunities to take advanced education or certification courses in the wine industry. And so we're looking at partnering with UC Davis here this next year to offer some programs for members only. So watch for more news coming around that. Julie, as we wrap up today, any exciting news that you would like to leave us with?
Well, I think I'll give you one piece of roundtable news and then one piece that's a little bit bigger picture. With the roundtable, I'm so excited that starting last year and now going forward ad infinitum, we're going to have 6 roundtables a year. And for those of us who need to take a break for all of harvest, to still get 6 amazing programs in per year, that really seems to be a membership-driven benefit because our schedules are always changing. We're on the road, we're bottling. So to have 6 opportunities instead of the past 5 is fantastic. We also have a brand new program that is going to foster mentoring. It piloted last month. It's expanding this month. It is for members in good standing only. And what we do is we put a senior member, very experienced, perhaps a GM or director of winemaking, along with 2 or 3 up-and-coming next-gen winemakers or people from viticulture. And we're informally getting together in 4 geographic spaces, northern southern Sonoma, northern southern Napa, and doing these mentorship meetings and lunches or happy hours, whatever works for the little pod of people. And that is a great way for us to get more connection in the group. Now, on a bigger picture, I want to give props to the men and women for WineSense. I met one of them 2 years ago at Premier Napa Valley, shouting out to Tico Perez from the Orlando chapter. There's a whole group of the Orlando people going to the big event in Finger Lakes this year. It's one of the most fun chapters I've had the privilege of visiting when I've been on the road for market visits. And I have to say, every chapter of Women for WineSense around the country brings its own flavor and composition. But oh my gosh, the common thread that we're sharing is the passion. And I'm really, really excited every time I meet people from another one of the groups beyond our Napa Sonoma, because there's so much common bond, and it leads to a lot of great personal as well as professional things that seem to just spring forth very easily as a next step. It's been humbling to meet so many amazing members. Looks like I've got about 700 more to go.
I love it. Well, with your energy, Julie, I wouldn't put it past you. So I'm sure it's going to happen here very shortly. Thank you, Julie, by the way, for taking time out not only to meet with us today, to share with us your perspective about the winemaking roundtable that you chair, but also the energy that you provide, the time that you spend bringing people together. You are a true connector for Women for WineSense. We couldn't do it without you. So big thank you for all that you do. Michaela Rodeno.
I'm not going to take all the credit. We have a wonderful program committee, and I'm a big believer in the power of the team. So guess what? The team's growing. So I think that means that there's only up from here. It's going to be epic 2018.
You got it. Michaela Rodeno, thank you so much for taking time out to chat with us today and talk about the beginnings of Women for WineSense. Anything you'd like to wrap up with as we conclude here?
Yeah, I would, two things. I would like to second what you said about Julie. Julie is a very, very good networker. And I'm sure that she does to a whole lot of other people what she's done with me, which is to send me an email, say, hey, I'm thinking about this. What do you think about that? Do you know anybody who could do something like this? And of course, eventually you hit onto something that you can help with, and off you go to the races, and she takes it from there. So it's not a big surprise to me that she's doing such a great job of bringing something besides viticulture and enology to her winemakers roundtable. And I think it's absolutely brilliant, and I hope the other roundtables are inspired to do more of the same also. I think it's terrific. The second thing is I can hardly wait to go to the Finger Lakes, because I've never been there, for one thing. I know the Women for WineSense chapter there is just having a lot of fun putting together a great program for us. It's supposed to be beautiful country. And Julie Johnson, who was Julie Williams when we co-founded Women for WineSense. She's now Julie Johnson, the owner of Tres Sabores Winery. And she and Susan Sokolblosser and I are going to do a panel discussion, a sort of a fireside chat at Finger Lakes. So I'm really looking forward to that.
How exciting. And so that's a really good point you bring up, Michaela. For those of you interested in learning more about the grand event taking place July 27th through 29th in Finger Lakes, go to womenforwinesense.org. Also, if you're curious to learn more about what all the buzz is about, visit the website, click on the chapters tab, locate Napa Sonoma. You'll see a lot of information there about the roundtable groups, our events calendar, different ways to connect. And we invite you to join us as our guest. Come out to an event. As a non-member, you're always welcome to join and sign up online. Check us out. If you have any questions about membership, Kit Gilbert is our membership director. She's absolutely wonderful. She'd be happy to talk with you. The buzz really is about the ability to get together with a group of professionals and wine enthusiasts, a network, mentor, get to know one another, learn a little bit, like Julie said, about things that are outside of your wheelhouse and how we can all work together to complement. And so, again, as we wrap up, Women for WineSense Napa Sonoma chapter, womenforwinesense.org, 27 years going strong. Thank you, Michaela, and thank you, Julie.
Thank you, Sandra.
Thanks.